All right. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and welcome to another Future Focus where we are living at the intersection of business technology and the human experience. If you did not read the post heading or description already, today's conversation is about multilingual accessibility and how AI is making something that has historically, I've been doing this for a long time, that has historically just been one of those things that felt like an impossible task. And it's making it so much easier and better, and honestly improving the user experience overall. So we're going to have that conversation today, hopefully blow your mind with what's possible. To help me navigate that conversation, I'm joined by Anuja Dhawan from Dübverse. And first of all, we were talking backstage. Thank you for joining me. First of all, really looking forward to this. And I'm like, I forget, where are you located? She's like, it's India. I'm like, what time is it? And it's 11 o'clock. So not only are you here joining me having this conversation, but you're doing it at a time when many people would have checked out and gone to bed. So thank you so much.
No, super happy to be here. And like I said, right, we have to really, we try to build this company, a global company from day one. So we have a lot of these time zone chats to kind of okay with it is what I would say. But happy to be here and happy to be chatting to a lot of stuff that's lined up for the next 1 hour.
Yeah, no, we're gonna have a good conversation, and maybe that's the next thing we can focus on getting AI to do is fix the time zone challenges, so that it just makes it easier. But I don't know that we'll solve that one. So today we'll solve another one. Now, for those who may not be as familiar with you as I have, as I've gotten to know you through this process, little background into where did you get your start, and how did you go from was running an AI company for global content accessibility? Was that a childhood dream of yours, or how did you end up getting into the space and caring about this?
Sure. I think I'll quickly cover what Dübverse is and then go deeper into my own self, and then connect the dots back. So, hey, everybody who's here, thanks a lot for sort of tuning in. I think Christopher does great content. I've been following that myself for, I think, over a year now. So, very happy to be on the other side this time. I run this company called Dübverse. We basically are a Gen AI company, been at it for about 2+ years. And the idea here is simple, where we're trying to break the language barrier on the internet that we see. Internet or the real world is not just English, and that's what we're trying to sort of do with AI.
Are you telling me not everybody speaks my version of English around the world? Not everybody understands what I can't. This is the first time I cannot believe this.
To you and your audience, I think that's one myth we want to break here, that it's not the same language, it's not the same accent, it's not the same way you speak, it's not the same meaning of the same words that we are putting out. It holds a lot of cultural and background values when it comes to language, and it's one of the most important aspect in terms of we as humans be able to communicate what we really feel. And I think that's why we are here, honestly. So that's what we do. And AI cannot solve the time zone problem, but AI can solve the language problem very, very well. And we've been doing that. We'll chat about that a lot. But yeah, going back, I think, to myself, I come from a small town about 100 kilometers from the capital of India, where, sorry if I connect the dots, we've always lived a very
Can I ask a follow-up question? When you say small, what's small for you? Because I'm actually always really curious when people say, because I grew up in a small town and it was 900 people. So to me, that's small. But then I talk to other people, small is like 12. So what's small for you?
My small would be about 10 million people.
That's small. That's small. Wow. Okay. See, here we go. Even locally, well, this goes back to sometimes the cultural and just background differences, where someone says, I come from a small town. To me, I'm thinking the one road through town, there's no stoplights, one stop sign. We didn't have internet till whenever. And then somebody's like, small, like we only had 10 million people. So even there, I just think of some of the differences that can pop up in language.
I think the difference also is that India is a very populous country. So per square feet, the number of people that we have is huge. So can that city take 10 million people? Maybe not, but do we co-live? Yes. So that's about, like I said, about 100 kilometers. So around Delhi. So almost part of the NCR region. grew up there. But yeah, I was saying that we were kind of always lived a very dual language life, right? With
Okay.
whatever the history of India, we were ruled for the longest time, then we came out of it. And the last generation was more struggle, where they were trying to find and really survive. But with us, it was more about that there are more exposure, more things that you can do with your own life, right? So, but we still always had that mindset in terms of that English is always looked up in India. If you speak very good English, if you're fluent in English, you're set, you'll do good in your career. As simple as
Okay.
that.
So culturally, it's like English is, that's how it's seen culturally.
It's looked
That's
up.
okay.
Yes,
Got
yes,
it.
yes. You have to, like, every parent would really want their kid to speak very fluent English and
Okay.
be able to be more confident like that, right? But so we were sent to English medium schools. But when we came home, when we spoke to our parents, extended families, it was always the local language, which in the northern belt is Hindi. And
Okay.
that change just happens so naturally. I know the other person speaks English, my English is on. I'm speaking to somebody at home, my Hindi comes
So
out.
you
So
just grew
that's
up and you could flip a switch, just no big deal. It was like, hey, I'm having a
yeah,
conversation. This
yeah,
person
yeah.
clearly speaks English. I'll speak English. Flip. This person speaks Hindi. I'll just speak Hindi. And that was very natural
Exactly.
to you.
And for the longest time, it was very okay. It was like, okay, this is how the world is. I go to office, I speak in English. I go to the internet, I speak in English. But at home, I speaking in Hindi. So that's how we grew up in a certain way.
Okay.
But yeah, come from a middle class family. Father has done his 0 to 1, came out of nothing to a lot of what we are today. So like the struggle journey, second generation after independence, so
Yeah.
seen all of that phase in a certain way. But yeah, life was good. Life was exciting always. I'm the youngest one. I think a lot of my personality gets formed because I'm the youngest one. We are the rebel. We want to go out and do something which nobody in the family has done. So that's where
Okay.
I think this innate
Okay.
feeling of doing something was sort of always there, and obviously inspired by my father a lot in terms of what value am I able to bring to the table for myself, for the society, for the larger good, and how do I sort of channel that. Like you said, I'm running an AI company, but I'm a commerce background. I'm not a technical person. I
Well, that's
understand
what I was going
technology
to ask,
now.
because how did that all then come together? So clearly there's this like
Yeah.
background that gave you the roots of, you saw the problem for what it was, which was you
Yes.
at some point recognized, hey, my life experience, which is I just fluently flip between things, which I think is the experience of a lot of people, whether it's they flip between languages or they just assume, well, I have all these conversations. I mean, I grew up, like I said, in a tiny town in Minnesota.
Mhm.
Nobody, I guarantee, ever thought, I wonder if the person I'm talking to speaks the same language. It just didn't cross their mind. And so I think
Yeah.
even just you describing that, so clearly you had that, but then where did that emergence of, hey, you know what, I might be able to do something, where did that come in?
Sure. So I think I'll go back to how I started my career. So graduated from Delhi University, came to Delhi to sort of do my graduation, saw a different world of as what was compared to my small town and now a
Okay.
big town was a huge difference for back then as well. Went to KPMG actually from a very,
Okay.
very large organization.
Oh,
Started there.
yeah. And then the big four consulting. So, yeah, all of a sudden the volume got turned up real loud.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, whoa, what's happening here? Right. And I could see people doing the same stuff for 10 years. And I was like, do I look at myself after 10 years doing exactly the same thing that I'm capable of doing very well today? So obviously it was very clear that I'm not individually as a person to be like a small fish in a big pond. I have to find my own pond and sort of rule it.
Okay.
Sort of came out very, very clearly from there. This was about 2015. That's where the startup boom in a certain way in India was really, really panning out. A lot of
Okay.
startups was coming in, investment was coming in. So from there, I was very lucky, I would say, went to a very early stage startup, which was tech based. I didn't know what technologies back then, to be honest, but it
Okay. So
just
you weren't a
happened. And
tech head. You weren't a tech head originally. It wasn't just something you were
not at all.
playing around
Not
with
at all.
computers. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Got it.
yeah. No, 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 no. Never. No, I don't have that story that I got my first computer when I was 9, started coding. No, none of that happened.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, I got the computer. I was doing Facebook, LinkedIn, all of that jazz, but not coding for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So that happened. So yeah, got into the startup early stage. So I was coming from big consulting company, and here there are like 20 guys sitting in at a basement of a very, very large office. of a building late at
Okay.
night, 10 o'clock in the night, still at office. Everybody is in their
So it
pajamas
was
and
a
chappals.
stereotypical startup, though. It did meet the
Yeah, yeah,
stereotypical
100%.
startup. Oh, for
Yes,
sure.
it did. So that's where I interviewed, and I was like, okay, this is a different vibe. Let's see what's happening here. So I very randomly sort of ended up joining them, but it was, I think, fascinating and sort of has set me up for everything that I am today. And I ended up spending
Okay.
5 years at that organization.
Okay.
So did everything, learn technology, learn to sell technology, learn to talk about technology. All of that happened. So I've set up cities for
Okay.
them, traveled across for them, all of that. And that even added further that, okay, now I know what my pond will look like. I'll have to build my own pond and
Okay.
rule it, right? So that
Well,
just
and
sort of
that's a
added
pretty
on to it.
unique. That's actually a pretty unique time period that you transitioned into tech, because if you went in 2015 and then were there for 5 years,
Yeah.
that really was when the deep learning and the AI advancement really started
Yes,
moving. Like that really
for sure.
was a foundational period of time where we went from, I mean, we were still doing advanced things with computers before that, but there
Yeah.
was a pretty significant technological leap that happened in 2017.
For sure. And I think from a technology business standpoint as well, right? We've sort of compartmentalized them as SaaS businesses, but before
Yes.
like early 2000, SaaS also did not exist. So that's the time
No,
period
it
when
didn't.
we, yeah, learned playbooks about SaaS. Why would people pay for software, cloud-based software, not a on-prem software? So all of that transition also was very similarly happening in those 5 years. And then COVID stuck us in 2020,
Yeah.
and everything was at pause. So that happened. But yeah, that time I ended up joining. I wanted to see things at scale. I thought I was still not ready to sort of take that leap. I still had to get the right partner. I was still sort of early thoughts from that standpoint. So I ended up joining Freshworks as again on the technology sales side, where I was
Okay.
selling a lot of SaaS products for them. Did that about for a year and a half. But again, they were going IPO back then, so they'd already figured out their life, and I knew that my impact is not going to be very huge to change the destiny of this company. So I was kind of then in very middle minds, and obviously we all had a lot of time at hand during COVID when we were stuck out, right? So that's where
Everybody
my
went through that existential crisis moment where they were like, what am I
yes,
really doing with my life?
yeah,
And is this what I want to be
correct.
doing? Okay.
Correct. So that's where my friend and now my co-founder Varshul, who's the brainy person here, the techie person here.
Okay.
The idea is also his brainchild, so to say. He was sort of dabbling with a lot of technology around 2017-18 when that phase exactly was happening. So he was
Yep.
doing brilliant stuff. He was writing papers. He was doing a bunch of stuff with IIT Delhi, which is one of the sort of technical institutes in India where a lot of the stuff happens. He was running his own lab for that matter with AI engineers to sort
Okay.
of dabble around what really generative AI is possible of. And this is 2018-19, right? So very, very early days of what we talk about today very
Yep.
casually. So that happened, but then again, COVID stuck. So he was alone and kind of thinking of doubling down on one thing because I met him at my line tray experience. He was also there for 4 years. So
Okay.
after his startup stint, he went back to academia. So that mix in a certain way gave him that sort of depth to sort of come up with such an idea which can really change in terms of how we do content, consume content, so on and so forth. So idea was very simple. Started more from a digital education standpoint. So from India standpoint, we are a land of languages, right? Like every 100 kilometers, how we speak really changes,
I
and
was going
every
to say,
state.
India. I've done enough work with folks in India. The cultural
Sure.
and language, the
Uh-huh.
linguistics over there is actually mind blowing. It's absolutely mind
Intense.
blowing. Yeah. It's
Yeah, yeah. So you can sort of compare this to Europe very, very clearly. So how they have different
yeah.
countries, we have different states, and everything is different. Culture, festivals, languages, attire, everything is very, very different
Yep.
in terms of whatever happens within these states as well. And obviously, language being that differentiator from a core standpoint. So with that, if education really had to go digital, we knew that it will happen in English. There are MIT, Harvard courses which are out there, but how does a child in a smaller town, in a village, really gets the same opportunity even if they get the internet? How does this really happen, right?
Yeah.
So that was the starting point in a certain way where we thought that if there is so much good quality content, YouTube was taking off in India, Geo was taking off, which sort of
Okay.
really propagated the internet consumption in India. So we knew that people will get access. Another 2 to 3 years, everybody will have their phones and they'll be running around with it the whole time. But what do they really consume if the quality content doesn't exist? So the thought, in a certain way, started from there, and now been 2.5 years doing a lot more. So that's my background story.
No, it's really interesting. And this is a really interesting, fun founder's journey to go through, because as you describe that, there are really some powerful milestones that a lot of people just see things where they are today, and they don't necessarily how all these pieces fit together. But even your point about SaaS and on-prem, I mean, I remember the days where the idea of a SaaS product was just unacceptable. Companies were like, you can't, are you kidding? You're going to buy a software from the internet and it's not going to be installed locally here? There's just no way we can do that. And I remember the battles I used to have with IT leaders over, this is the future of software. And we were like, no way.
Yeah.
So that shift was significant. But then you talk about the advancement of artificial intelligence, but the one you subtly hit at that I think also is right in there is, things like edX and Coursera that had radically democratized educational content.
Yeah.
And there really was that boom. And YouTube was doing the same thing, where there's all these really intelligent people putting together fantastic quality content, but you're dealing with a lot of complexity when it comes to this. And this goes to something we talked about backstage, where people assume this stuff just magically happens. But then on top of it, also, when you have this underlying assumption that, well, everybody thinks, talks, and understands like I do, like you said, MIT can create a course.
Yeah.
It may be the best $150,000 online course that they've put together, and it may be absolutely wonderful. But then there's only a very limited number of people. So even if you put it in Coursera or edX, or you put it free on YouTube, that's great. And you've taken a step towards accessibility, but there's still a huge percentage of the world that would go, I can't do anything with this. It doesn't mean a thing to me. Okay. So you decided to take that on. You decided, we're going to use AI and we're going to tackle it.
So yeah. So he obviously sort of had built something, and I had enough time at hand. Freshworks was the comfortable job, so to say. So I thought, let me help you. I know people. I know I'm the salesperson. I can talk. Let me just go talk to people. I have this new product to sell. And I tell you the reaction of people. This is early 2021, mid 2021. I was doing a demo with one of the edtechs in India, and I literally had the other person, I think he was the head of production or something on those lines. He jumped out of the chair. He's like, this is impossible. This is no reality. This is it was, I think, the best thing. And I think that one demo gave me the conviction to sort of leave everything else, and this is the gold mine that we're sitting on, and this is going to be that sort of life-changing opportunity for me as well. Because again, I'm no techie, right? I can't go here, go and create a tool or a product. But today is the internet world. Today is the SaaS world that we live in. So I need a product to sell. I need technology. So that's where my conviction also came from. But the reaction of the audience earlier was brilliantly amazing, and that gave us a lot of courage to sort of go deeper, go more, find out more, and be able to come out with a production ready tool which enables so much in today's day and time.
So let's talk about why people had that reaction, because I think understanding this problem is really, it's the complexity of it. I think a lot of times just gets overlooked, because I mean, I've been in the space, in just the content in general, education content space, for a long time. And a lot of times it's not that people didn't want to create more accessible content. There's always, I think, been a true desire. I mean, even in some of the biggest corporations, we sometimes joke that there were people that would just be like, it's fine. It's good enough if it's in English. But it really was more because people knew what went into that. I mean, even something simple like a document. I just think back to days where you would go, okay, we have this document. What if we wanted to put it in a different language? And half the room would just go, no. And then even if we want just this one document to be in 5 languages, the process, the time to do it, the editing, the management of this whole thing just becomes an absolute nightmare. So then I think about video content, and I remember my first time in a global organization. I still remember one of the first meetings I was in where we were doing some of this culture work, and we'd created this really great video about the change in culture. And I just came to the table all excited going, this is really great, but we're a global company. We should create this in several languages at least. I mean, we have, and people just looked at me like, no, we don't have budget for that. We don't have time for that. There's no way we're going to take this and turn this into it. So talk a little bit about how you're, go for it. Oh, what were you going to say? I told you we were going to interrupt each other. So
think of the process, right, of what really goes into it. So if we think of a video creation journey as well, right, you have to think of the idea, the thought with itself. You have to write the script, you have to create a video separately, the visuals of it, a person speaking, whatever that might be, and then the voiceover happens, and then somebody to put all of this together for you, right? So creating video is no joke.
No, I mean, I remember a talking head video, a well-produced talking head video. A 5-minute video might have cost, I mean, and I don't know if these figures are still accurate, but I remember back when we were doing, it cost 20 to 30 grand to do just a short, easy. By the time you were all in with the production crew and the editing and all this other stuff. And I even think back, I think some of the YouTube content creators I know, where they'll talk about how much they spend on a single video, and you go, there's a ton of money and time and resources that goes into something that people may just look at and go, what? It's just a video.
It's just a video.
It's just a video. No, like, what's so hard about that?
Yeah. No. The effort that it really takes to sort of get a good quality video. Obviously, like you're creating a very like a 10-second TikTok maybe is easy, and they're trying to simplify a lot of that. But that's also no joke, so to say, to be able to produce that, keep churning out more and more videos. It takes a lot on the person sort of creating it. So now think of that. Now you've created a video, you've put a lot of thought to it. Now you're saying, I want to do this in another language, which is completely a different ball game. I have to redo the whole script. I have to get another voiceover. I have to get the mixing done. If there is an error that's happening, I need to go back to my voiceover journey, get that person, and then do that mixing again. And that is the whole reason why this never happened, right? Because the effort, the multi-party effort, right? It's not like one person, I get one person, everything will be done. I need different people for every language that I really want to go to. Then I need to mix it. Then I need to make sure that this is happening in the right direction. So there is a maker checker that still needs to happen. So hence people did not really go in that area at all.
They did.
That's not the beast I want to touch.
And back in the day, there would sometimes be just this like, and you couldn't do it for video. There were parts that you could propose to do it for video, but like I remember, back in the day, people would be like, "Well, why don't you just use Google Translate?" And you're like,
"No, not that."
Like those were like the early days, but like it was not an effective. There just was not an effective way to do it. And again, it's not because people didn't desire it. It's not because there wasn't a need. I know that this was a major pain point for basically every organization I ever worked with. And again, it wasn't just, if you're a global company, because even if you're, I mean, like you said, India, there's tons of languages within India. The US is the same thing. Assuming that just because you're in the US means that everybody speaks fluent English is actually a bad assumption.
No, I think there's enough Spanish-speaking people within the US as well, where they can understand English, but would they really understand and learn something in English? Maybe not. So that, I think, is something that really needs to be questioned and done better. I think the other journey I also want to add here is that how the shift has really happened, right? So when the internet happened, or when these earlier trainings were more text-based, right? Or more, there's a written doc maybe in a certain way. Then came the images that, okay, you can visualize it better. You can do a presentation and the stuck around is longer. Then came the video, that if you're able to make it a little more engaging, if people are able to immerse themselves in the experience of learning, they'll be able to retain more. And now it is going more towards personalization, so to say, that is it the cultural nuance of what really I have learned over my lifetime is embedded in the video that I'm watching. Does it speak my language? Does it really talk to me, or is it still talking to 1,000 people? So I think that's the journey that the content material in a certain way has taken, and now will only sort of keep going narrow into what people want, and not what a HR head has decided that this is the cost we want to do.
That's not the case
anymore.
that shift is happening at a pace that I think is overwhelming for a lot of people, because the
Yeah.
expectation from people is just rising. It's people are just, because AI is playing such a role in so many things. I mean, it's not
Mm-hmm.
just affecting the way we consume content, it's affecting the way we shop, it's the way we interact with people. It's affecting everything. So people have this expectation that if I'm going to commit my time and attention to something, it needs to be tailored to me.
My
And so
experience.
something even as subtle as language
Mm-hmm.
can be massive, because it's like, oh, that's not for me. That's created for some generic audience that isn't me. So I'm just going to move on and do something different. And that rise is only going to continue more.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think if you also look at some of these countries, right, how well they've preserved their language. Let's look at China for that matter, right? They refuse to accept English left, right, center. They say this is our
Yeah.
language. If you have to deal with us, you have to learn my language. I think a lot of other nations were not able to do that, and sort of everybody moved towards English. But now I think there is enough other language influence which is coming out, and if you have to really deal with them as whatever stakeholders, you really need to go there, sort of take that step from a language standpoint again.
Yeah. Well, and I think something underlying in that is going to change even just the cultural acceptance of this is, I think before there was a general understanding that language was extremely complex and it was
Mm-hmm.
very difficult. And so there was this kind of general acceptance and understanding that people are trying their best. And it wasn't necessarily offensive if something was like, well, it's in English, but I kind of get, like, there's a lot more to
Mm-hmm.
this. So I understand why. And one of the things that I don't think people are thinking about as much is, as we move into an age where the general population starts to know it is much easier to do this, that it is accessible, you
Yeah,
can do
yeah.
it for cheap and personalized. And if you're not, it can almost put off an offense of, you actually don't really care because I know you could
Mm-hmm.
do this and you're not. And so I think something that is coming, I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think one thing that companies and just people in general need to think about is, we are going to get to a point where you may send an unintended message that I don't
Mm-hmm.
actually care about you, because I didn't take the time to take this ridiculously easy step to personalize this to you. And that actually can be I think we're going to get to a point where that may be more off putting than it has historically been.
Yeah, yeah. I think this will also fall a lot under the DNI. I think diversity and inclusion, which was again a
Yes.
very ignored topic for the longest time. But today, you cannot ignore that, right? You have to care for it. You have to
No.
make sure that you're taking efforts, conscious efforts, to make people feel more included. And I think this is definitely a sort of an extended lens within that ecosphere as well.
Yeah. Well, and on that topic, two things I would hit on with this one. One, anybody who's been
So,
following kind of the headlines and the themes may have heard, like, oh, DEI was kind of a trend and now it's declining. And one of the things I keep talking about with that is, no, it's not. The way it was being done is changing, as I think it should be changing. But the actual initiative of being more inclusive, recognizing diversity, being more equitable, that only is continuing to rise. So I mean, I've heard arguments
mhm.
against it going, oh, that was a fad. And I'm like, that is not a fad, and it's not going
No.
away, and you'd be foolish to ignore it. So I think
I
that's
think it's the
to your,
new normal.
it
It is
is.
the new normal, right? It is more acceptable now, so it doesn't feel like we're doing something out of way. But now, more and more things will keep becoming the part of the usual as business in a certain way. So that will
Yes.
not feel like I'm going out of my comfort zone. But I 100% believe that
But I
that's
think
important and that we
that's what I was
follow.
getting at before, is as people start to know it's easier and just more of a,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you just be more inclusive? It
Mhm.
actually, what would have maybe been accepted as, oh, well, I get it, will actually feel like you're being exclusive, intentionally exclusive. And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah. Yeah.
risks that companies may run into, is they go, hey, we're doing what we've always done. Why are people so much more upset by this? And it's like, well, because what was socially acceptable before, people know that you could be doing better and you're not. And that's giving
Mhm.
the impression that you're actually choosing exclusivity. You're actually choosing,
Yeah.
you know what, we're not going to take this step. because of that. But the other thing I was going to say is, I don't think people always recognize how much movement you can make towards being a more inclusive environment when you accommodate and account for language differences. And I just, again, growing up in a small town, one of the things that I spent a lot, I mean, there was a lot of different cultural groups that would migrate in and out of the area. And I did a lot of like hard labor as a kid. I worked out in the field. And there is nothing more exclusive than being in an environment where you don't speak the language. I mean, that is a very isolating feeling when you feel like, I don't know what's being said. I don't understand what's going on around me. People are communicating with each other, but I feel completely there's nothing more that makes you feel like an outsider than being in a group of people not speaking your language.
Yeah, I think 100% agreed there.
Okay. So let's talk about how this is changing, because I think we've blown out the problem statement. So anybody who's like, I don't really think we need to, I think we've blown the problem statement out, but I am curious how you're going about this, because we talked about how complex this can be. And I think everybody has had that bad experience with language translation of like the Google Translate, where you're like, oh, I'll just type this in here. And then now I speak the other language. And somebody who's a native speaker is like, that is terrible. That is not at all how we would say things. So how are you using artificial intelligence to make it not only more accessible, but also easier?
Sure. So I'll cover this in two parts. One is the more infrastructure layer of how the LLMs and how the understanding in a certain way of AI is built. And then I'll talk more about at Dübverse of what we're trying to do, right? So if we talk about AI and these LLMs also, right, how are they trained? We've seen a lot of lawsuits come across left, right, center, but they are primarily trained on the data which is available on the internet.
Yes.
What is available on the internet is English. So that's where the first.
It's a fairly biased database. Let's just say that.
Yeah. From a language standpoint, so
sure,
any other standpoint, like male, female, it's so bad when you just go to a Google Translate. Also, that's where all the data in a certain way is coming about from. So, so what it is trained on is primarily English. What it really understands is very, very biased opinions. So, how do we really make sure or sort of train it better in a certain way where it is able to understand more? So, that's one problem I would say that's still at hand. That how does AI as a being, I think it's almost a being amongst us now, really understand.
It's a thing.
Same. So how does this being that's sort of growing amongst all of us really moves from one language to another language very, very seamlessly? So now obviously with AI capabilities, I'm sure everybody here has seen, so it is everything as humanity that we know of can be sort of synthesized and put into one single being. So can that be taught? Yes. Are we there? I would not really say that. Does AI very seamlessly moves across different languages? Not really. But from an effort standpoint, I think there's a lot that everybody in the right position is trying to do. There's multiple LLMs for Indian languages being put out, for other languages being put out. I think Europe is also trying to come up with their own LLMs, because again, the language nuances are so specific. If we the way we've been talking about it, it's still difficult for it to understand. Now coming to how
going back to the challenge with this, but before you go into that transition, is a lot of people see AI as the end product, but forget, going back to even what we talked about with like video production, people aren't necessarily seeing what goes into actually creating that product so that it is there. And again, it can only be as good as the data it's trained on, which 100%. Digitization of things is not equal across the board. So going back to it, there are certain languages, certain cultures that just have not been digitized to the same level that other things are. So naturally, you're going to have bigger challenges with getting some of that stuff up. And like, well, you got to have, and it's not just like you need like one example. I mean, you need large amounts of data to train this stuff.
Yeah. And it is also that you need parallel data, right? So if I am saying as simple as just round the corner in English, in Hindi, it will have such a different meaning. meaning that
Yeah.
it will not hold true. You will not be able to hold that conversation, right?
No.
Another example, famous example, is something as a butterfly, right? If I talk about butterfly, it's an insect. We see that very beautiful, but for in context of swimming, it's a very different thing, right? A butterfly stroke
Yes.
cannot be a insect, right? It's a very different context that I'm talking about. Now, when
Or
we
if you talk
add
about
a
the butterfly effect, I mean, even think about the
yeah,
butterfly
definitely.
effect. You're not talking about an insect at all
No,
type
not
of a
talking
thing.
about the swimming. Now you're talking about a
No.
different concept altogether, right? So now within the same language, there are so many complexities, and now you translate this to different languages, right? That exist. So the problem statement that we have at our hand, it's still very very complex, and it is, like you said, right? Is an assistance. It's not the end product. It's going to make your life easier, but will it do the complete work? Will it replace your job? No. You'll still have to do the work. The humans are still required. It is primarily, think of it like like a personal assistant that everybody has, which is very smart. Is how we sort of look at it. Now
So
coming on, I think, to the yeah.
yeah, well, so on that, and I'm curious just on the general state of artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
I'm curious, especially since you're doing so much in linguistics. And I actually had somebody on last week who we were talking about the fact that AI is actually helping break down dyslexia because it can actually understand the linguistic nuances of language and make it easier. Where, for folks who may be less familiar with where things are in this, how far have we come in this? Because again, if you're somebody who's had a bad example of Google Translate, you may still be thinking like, yeah, it's not great. How far have you seen it come in terms of, no, when it does a translation, it actually does do a good job of accounting for context cues, terminology, things like that. If I'm translating, let's say something from English, and let's say American English, where we use lots of these turns of phrases that culturally people are like, I don't know what you're saying. How good is it today at actually translating that into Hindi and actually capturing some of
Mhm.
that?
Sure. So I would say there's no one answer to this. It really again depends on which AI or which LLM or which model are we
Okay.
really looking at. So for an example, if you go to OpenAI, obviously the 4 Turbo that they've launched is very very powerful. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 10 billion is the, I'm not sure of the word, not sure of the number, but it is the biggest which is out there so far. So the translation with Turbo are great. It understands more. It has more data that is being trained on, and obviously then it in a certain way also builds its own general intelligence, where it is able to maybe understand the jokes, the sarcasm as well. If you go to like a 2.53, the jokes were not very clear to the AI in a certain way.
Okay.
But same ways, if we go to a different model altogether, which are so many more out today, right? Google, Gemini, so on and so forth. So everybody will have a different reaction in a certain way. So hence this becomes very contextual of what is my content, what is my language, what type am I really trying to do. All of that has to be in a certain way fed into the system, and then it
Yep.
can give out better results. And that's something that we are sort of attempting to do at Dubverse as well. Right, so two three
Okay.
things I want to cover when we talk about nuances and how we sort of tackle with them. So let's look at the video landscape first, right? It starts from a 10-second TikTok and goes up to a 3 hour long movie, which is
Yeah.
very complex, has emotions, has everything that's happening, like 20-30 characters. So obviously not everything that AI can do very seamlessly as of today. So we at least at Upwords have picked certain domains, certain niche, where we think that AI is capable of sort of doing this at a good quality, at an
Okay.
acceptable quality, and which is basically mid to short form content, which is about a 15 to 30 minutes at max, and educational in nature. Conversation, it can, but will it be entertaining for the next person to watch? Maybe, maybe not. But if it's an educational content, I'm trying to deliver a certain learning for the third person who's going to watch it later in his or her own language, then yes, it can hold context. It can take the meaning from one language to another language and deliver it.
Okay.
That it can do very very well. Now, from a process standpoint, what we do is we take a larger video, we break it down into smaller chunks at a video and at a audio level, so that the context is moved from one sentence or one sort of statement to the next statement. And at a
Okay.
overall also, we are able to in a certain way summarize what this video is about, what the presenter is trying to sort of talk about. It
Okay.
can be Power
So
BI,
from
it
an
can
audio,
be
you're actually breaking it down, because I think this is where helping people understand the complexity of linguistics and how this works helps people understand how AI fits in, and also the role
Yeah.
people plays in it, because it's not one of those, to your point, and you said it well, this isn't just handed over to AI and magically everything happens, because there is nuance to this, that if you do that, it's not going to work well. So you're breaking the feed apart from the video and the audio, so that one, as it's looking at the audio, and I think this is where AI probably naturally is playing into this, it's doing the transcription of that first to actually get this into
Yes.
a transcript, so that it can then be contextualized, understood, and then translated. So that's kind of the baseline.
Yeah, that's the process. So we take a video, we create a transcript out of it. So it still remains as the same traditional way of doing it. It's just way faster and everything AI is doing now. So I create a transcript, I do the translation to the second language, and at a break it down segment. I don't take the whole video together because AI cannot hold such long context as well. So I need to break it, give it smaller context window so that it is able to retain the meaning and move next. Do the translation. The third part is where we do the voiceover, where AI speaker sort of comes in, speaks out the whole speech. The audio is generated, and then the audio and the video is patched back together at a segment level. Here is a lot of complexity involved, because whatever I will speak in English in 10 words, I might take 12 words in Spanish. So now, how does my visual and my audio remain same when I'm delivering the same message of that same segment? So there's a lot of engineering in a certain way that it goes in to really give you an output.
I'm going to slow you down, because I want to actually break this down for people to think about this, because this is what could look like just this simple oversimplification. I actually think it's fascinating the way it's doing this, because to your point, this is some of the complexity that we have to deal with when we think, and everything you're saying is why in the past, everybody, when you went, hey, let's translate this video, just went, yeah, no, because in the past, even getting the transcript from the video might be a nightmare. Actually getting that script from the video might be a nightmare. Now we can do that quickly. Now they're breaking it down. You can do the translation, which it makes sense in terms of having to break it apart, because contextualizing it happens in chunks. And I think that's just natural in the way content is broken up. It's broken up into chunks where it's like, okay, we can contextualize this piece that's translated back. Now, you said in there, as part of this process, you're actually, it's not just subtitles, because I think that's a big difference as we talk about this. It's more than just you're watching the same video in English, but at the bottom underneath, there's a little subtext underneath that's in a different language. It's actually now the audio you're hearing is in the native language as well. So you're actually, now, is that being done with AI? Are you using AI voices to do that? Okay.
Yes. And I think on the previous note, the subtitle note, right? Again, if you look through the globe, there are different countries where only subtitle is acceptable, and there are countries where only dubbing is acceptable. Now, this is to do with a lot of cultural nuances again, but if you have to go to Germany, if you have to present something, you cannot do it with subtitles. You have to dub it, you have to speak German in your video, audio, whatever that might be. But if you're maybe going to India, you can do a Hindi subtitle. It's okay. We are okay with that.
Well, and actually some of that has to do with regulations.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember that was some of the nightmare of this stuff. Well, like Germany specifically was one where it's like, nope, you actually cannot. You will get into legal trouble if you go, no, it's an English video, but there's subtitles. It's like, no, it's going to be spoken by a German speaker or else.
Yes. So that was, I think, a thing of the past, where you could just do subtitles for some of these countries and still pass through from a regulation standpoint. But will it really get adopted, engaged with? Not really. So what we do is, as the third step, where the new script now, which is generated from our translation, we a voiceover, sort of a AI voiceover again, sort of steps in, reads out the whole script, takes the right pauses, right tonality, sort of tries and brings it out together, and now we have a MP3 or an audio file ready.
Okay.
And now
because this again helps people understand where the AI is fitting into this, because this is also, that's another level of AI in there. That's now, not only are you using it to transcribe, but then you're using it to translate. Then you're using artificial intelligence to then create a voice that is speaking in the native tongue. Because again, that used to be an absolute nightmare from VideoCon. You'd have to go hire a native speaker to then record them doing this. I mean, this used to cost so much. I mean, I literally saw invoices for this stuff at times and was like, you've got to be kidding me. We had to go hire a voice actor from 13 different countries to be able to record these different things. And now AI is saying, no, you don't. We'll get the script, we'll translate it, we'll then have an AI voice come back and do it. So that's kind of the next gen, and that's all being automated through here. And now I think that gets us to the point where you're like, now we have the problem of you're hearing a voice, but it's not matching. And now this takes me back to like old Kung Fu movies that I've seen where you're like, it can be a difficult experience.
It is. And hence, two things here primarily, and hence we've stuck around a little more to educational content, because the person who's watching is not watching for entertainment, is not watching for that dopamine kick, right? I'm watching because I want to learn something. So maybe they're a little forgiving is how I like to look at it, that it is not going to match exactly 100%, because that's not really possible. We try and sort of stick in a lot of logic internally, but that's not where it is right now. It is either we have to get into the recreation of the video altogether, which is a different path. Here what we are trying to do is we are trying to repurpose your video, which is already created, at the least amount of cost, effort and time taken, to be able to sort of move into a different language altogether.
Okay.
So there are solutions for entertainment which are a little deviation of what we're talking. We do that as well, but here the focus is more to get that video quickly, so that you're able to increase the per dollar value that you've already spent on your video, and now you're able to extend that by sort of translating that to different languages. So the last and the most difficult step is to sort of patch both of these things together. Video, we do not change anything as of now. We don't do the lip sync part. We don't touch the video so much, but audio, this new audio is patched onto the video. And what you see as output is basically visually everything remains the same, but the audio is replaced with a different language where the context remains the same. The content remains the same. The length also more or less remains the same, but the language in a certain way is different, and you have a whole new world of audience that you can reach out to your video.
And so that part then also is part of the, now is that human assisted? Is that AI assisted? Because going back to, I get for educational content, it's maybe not doing the full lip syncing part yet. But there is this timing of, like there's visuals usually tied to videos and there's things like that. So you can't have the timing be just so wildly off there that what they're saying is like, wait, that's not even what we're talking about right now. So you're now also then, as you're layering this audio back with the video, you're actually making sure that, okay, contextual cue wise, it's staying relatively close, even though the lips might not be exactly perfect with what's being saying. Contextually, the video is still visually and audibly context accurate.
Similar, yes. So two things here again. So one is, go back to when we said that we break down the video, right, into smaller chunks. So this is this in this process also we use the same thing. We know that within say 10 seconds to 25 seconds you've set this segment. So now if it's taking me longer or shorter, I can stitch my audio to sort of fit into the same segment that I have. But whenever my 26 second is coming, it's the next sequence or the segment that I moved on to. It's transitioning. And the second part is the output that we sort of give out is depends on the input video, of course, but it's about a 80 to 85% accurate in terms of the language translation, the timing accuracy, so on and so forth. So the last leg in a certain way needs to be assisted by human. So that's where we've built a whole studio within the platform where you, like a video editor, you can go make changes with your English keyboard. You can type in any language, Hindi, Chinese, which are different letters in a certain way. Within the product, we've added a lot of features. So this is the SaaS part to it in a certain way, where you make a very feature powerful product with whatever output AI is given is still needs assistance in a certain way and is not ready to publish. So that's where the software part comes into play, and we give you a lot of power in your hands, that you're able to do it quickly and it's ready to go.
Okay. So you're getting it, which again, to me, and maybe it's just because I'm so familiar with this process. I mean, this is when we described what we just went through, this could be weeks or months of effort. When I think about what this would, and tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes in excess of hundreds, depending on the complexity of it, to be able to break this stuff down and translate it, get it in a different native speaker's tongue, then go back and do all this. And so the automation part is really automating about 85. You're saying accuracy wise, it's getting you to like the 85, 90% range. That then at that point, you're going back and then there's an interface. And at that point, then you're fine tuning, making sure like, okay, we might make some adjustments type of a thing here, but it's basically lifting 85% of that work off of somebody's back.
Yes. Yes. And the last 10 also is very, what do you say, in your hands, right? Earlier, it used to be if there's something wrong, you have to go back to the studio, rewrite, re-record, re-put it on the
Are
video.
you kidding me? I mean, I remember there were times you'd like go to edit something, and you're like, that's not even the right audio. Now we got to go find the same voice actor, and we've got to go find them and be like, can you re-record this section because the way they did it isn't right? And it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare.
So all of that is not required. You're still on the platform. You're still on the software. You can also think of it like an interface of where you're able to engage with AI, right? So now AI has a mind of its own. It has given you a certain output, but you're saying, no, I want it my way. So these are the changes that I want. So you can interface with it through a software. It's a web application, so to say, which works on any browser, and can be very easily. The power comes in your hand at the user level.
Okay. And I think
that's what
go for it.
So that's what really leads us to in the direction, right, of how we are building this, or who is it that we are building for. I think what the last decade was more about decision makers, right? That I need to sell something very fancy, complicated to a decision maker who's a CIO or a CHRO who's going to take more complex decisions. It's going to be 6 month sales cycle, and that's when this sort of gets approved, and I can use it now. But I would really say of how these new AI tools are being built are more user first. When we have discussions internally, it's about the user. What is his or her problem? How do I make their life easier? And not more about that. How do I make the conversion happen faster at a decision making power? Because we or as ethos of the product in a certain way is value first, and then you sort of charge for it. Because people are aware in today's time, so they want to experience it first. And the other caveat that comes to AI products is that people have never seen this, right? People don't believe in it. It's very difficult for any individual to imagine, is this really possible? Is it a gimmick that they're selling?
We just talked through the complexity of this. Anybody who's dealt with this, it can sound like there's no way. And again, if you're familiar with the technology, it seems much more plausible because you're like, yeah, I get it. I understand how all these pieces. But if you're not as familiar with the nuances of AI and how all the pieces fit together, it could absolutely sound like fairy dust and spirit sprinkles, where you're just like, you've got to be kidding me. You take a video and in minutes have it translated in another language with another, like, there's no way that that's possible. And it's like, oh, it absolutely is possible.
So actually, right, so when we started, this was again mid 2021, and people would call this deep fake. It did not have the respect it had today, right? So people would say, no,
you know what? I didn't even think about that. I could see that taking some heat, where people would go, well, that you're deep faking this. You're basically taking something and you're completely creating an artificial layer onto it, which so I guess I can even see some of the skepticism. I can see the skepticism around, like, wait a minute, how do I feel about this?
Exactly, right, because this is not a human that I'm dealing with. How is system able to talk now? So all of those were things and questions that we've dealt with, and these were obviously more traditional businesses, so they were not very open to change as well, right? Because
it sounds I can see it sounding a little science fiction to people, going like, what are you really doing with this artificial intelligence? Like, how do you know that video is not just me saying a bunch of horrible thing? You're like, well, okay.
All of that, right? So hence what we sort of move towards is more the users, right? That we know there's somebody who's facing this problem, so let's go to them directly. Let's give them value up front, which is basically just putting in a video without hitting any paywall. You're able to translate that into a different language. You have your output ready in front of you. If you like it, you sort of move forward with it. If you don't like it, then you try another video, is what my suggestion is usually. Don't go away from it.
Okay.
But yeah, the point is that give that value, make them experience the platform, and then how we've priced it also in a certain way is that the decision making is very, very fast, that you would want to just sort of include this into your workflow,
Yeah.
because it just matches everything that you really want.
Well, and I think two things that come to based on what you said with this. I can see where there's some of that healthy skepticism. And to be fair, I get it. I get where people kind of go, this sounds like
Same.
witchcraft, what you're talking about.
Yeah. So that's where
But
our the website of our homepage has the word magic used in it, the most magical way that you can dub your videos, because we understand that and we want to acknowledge that upfront,
yeah,
that we are with you. This is very new.
yeah, we get it. We get that this
Yeah.
feels like magic. But I think one of the things that I think through this discussion, this emphasizes, though, and it's a caution to people, but also I think an encouragement to people. This, everything we just described, very much is a human centric process through here.
Uh-huh.
Like the concerns people would have, yes, they are legitimate concerns. If you literally were just going, here, take the video and we're just going to hit publish and we're not even going to look at it, we're just going to put it out there. That would just be a foolish mistake in general to do that. And
Mhm.
I mean, that would be a foolish mistake to do even if humans were involved in the whole process. I mean, I remember when we used to do this the old school way, one of the nightmares was you were constantly doing revisions and no, that's not it. And you couldn't, and it was extremely time consuming. So we're not necessarily saying, hey, the magic of AI is just set it and forget it. You don't need to worry about it. It's like, well, no, you actually still do need to play a critical role in making sure that the product that you're creating is a quality product and accurate, so that it isn't a deep fake of you saying, I mean, it's not going to be, obviously, but that's the point, is to go, well, is it accurately
Yeah, yeah.
representing that? And you need those people in the loop, which should encourage people who may look at this and go, oh my goodness, my job was, dubbing
No,
or
no.
doing this kind of stuff. Now
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
nothing left for me to do. It's like, no, there absolutely is, but your role has distinctly changed. And it's less of this, honestly, logistical headache mess that we used to have to deal with.
100%, I think 100%. And what we see very interestingly also happening is that people are using this as and creating service layer on top of this. People are saying, I
Yeah.
know the language, AI is doing most of my work, and I'm going to deal with my client and I'm going to get this out at 50% of the price. They still make a lot of more margin than what they would earlier, but now they know that this is what is going to enable them to do a lot more than what they would have done earlier with their own time. So it is only
Yes.
and only enablement and accessibility in a certain way that it increases, and does not replace anybody anytime soon.
Well, no, and I think your point to this with that is not only is there humans in the loop on that, but I love what you said, and I think this is a message I continue to reiterate as AI starts taking things on. At least if you're using it right,
Yeah.
everything we described, you could use it wrong. You could do it the wrong way and create a lot of headache and mess for yourself. But if you're doing it
Yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah.
not only are you keeping humans in the loop on this, but I love the point you brought up about improving your service level, where now, whether you're internally using this, whether you're a service provider using this, you can now focus that additional time that you've created that used to be committed to this.
Mhm.
I mean, following up on emails, trying to keep all the things coordinated, keeping the files organized and all this other stuff. You can now spend that time that was honestly wasted time in the relationship building and the problem solving and the improving product
Yeah.
quality.
Yeah.
So you actually can do higher order activities and offer a better product. Yes, it can compress your timeline, but it's not necessarily just now do things faster. It's like, well, you can do them better. And I think
Mhm,
that's something
mhm.
that should be encouraging to people who may be like a little bit nervous about how this stuff works.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, for sure. I think from others aspect as well, right? We've seen Copilot come in, and that has just increased the productivity of the coders so much, because you don't have to go through the whole thing, write it again every time you're doing something new. You can just, what the usual standards are, pick it and move on. Is more important. So I think people. My message and my how I look at it is definitely that this is going to increase your productivity. This is going to make you do better stuff. Even if you take, say, you were taking 8 hours to do something, this is going to make you do in 4 hours. So 4 hours you can choose to work more, or you can just choose to relax as well, depending on whatever
Yeah.
stage you're at. But it just gives you more time at hand to be able to do more.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other piece that you just hit on there is, I think it's that autonomy and empowerment that this kind of technology
Yes.
gives you. Like you said, it used to take 8 hours and there was nothing you could do about it. It was like, that's just what it takes. There's just
Mhm.
no way around it. Now, the automation part might take 4 hours, and you might say, well, that extra 4 hours, either we might use for something else, or we might use it
Mhm.
to improve the overall quality of the engagement and what we're doing with things. Like, but you
Yeah.
have more choice in what you did. And I think in the past it was like, there's just nothing I can do. There's literally no way around this. And I think that's one of the really encouraging things that can be very unsettling. I will acknowledge for people that can be unsettling, because as much as we say we want to be empowered,
We don't.
it can also be really uncomfortable when you're like, right, but what
Yeah.
do I do with that extra time? And it's like, I mean, what do you want to do? What's the best use of it? People are like, I kind of in some ways was comfortable when I just knew this is how everything works. So I am empathetic to the folks who are a little bit uncomfortable with the fact that it is different. So
Yeah, I think to that point, see, we as humans, right, we get used to patterns, we get used to predictability, and that's where we find comfort. And now this is kind of changing the rules of the world of how it
it
was
is.
done. So it is
Yeah.
unsettling, but I think I really sort of push people to sort of engage with it more. Obviously, if people are sort of hearing this, they definitely have certain amount of exposure as compared to others, people who don't have access to internet, so on and so forth. So I think your curiosity is really going to unlock a lot more, because what these tech people are doing, and I think that's what I really bring onto the table as well, that technology will create a lot, will happen, but what use cases is it really able to solve? What is it? How do
Yes.
we include that in our daily life? I think that's a very different nuance altogether to it, and only your curiosity can answer that for everybody.
Well, I don't think we could have ended on a better note than that. I think that really hopefully leaves people, one, in awe of what technology is doing for some of these things. That really should be an encouragement and excite people, but also, balancing and knowing, so how do you navigate this? Because I am sensitive to the fact change is difficult for anybody, and I get it. And it can be disruptive. But I think when we really start leaning into it and going, hey, we can change things for the better, and everybody
Hmm.
wins in this. And I love it. And so I love the work you're doing. And I can only imagine where we're going to be in a couple years from now. I just think about the length of content we'll be able to do this, the lip sync, the other things
Yeah,
that we'll be
yeah,
able to do to make this even better than it already is. So definitely
for
want to
sure,
stay
for sure.
connected.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think this was lovely, and I think I would really want to take languages in a certain way along with wherever we go, right? Because the next one last piece that I had was that this example I give a lot, but if we get to the world of metaverse, right? If you're really in that stimulated reality, and I meet somebody from Japan, and I still don't speak their language, what? How do I interact with them? I think the
Yeah.
language will still play a very, very important role for me to be able to exchange my ideas with whoever I meet on the internet as well. So I think let's
Yes.
include other languages apart from English onto the internet, so that the world becomes more inclusive.
I I absolutely love that, and I am very much for that as well, where it's like, hey, instead of trying to make everybody the same, let's use this technology to
No,
encourage and celebrate the diversity while still making it accessible and inclusive to everybody. And I think that's the beauty of where this stuff is going, is we don't have to try and say, let's try and jam everybody into the same box. It's like we don't need to do that.
no,
We can
yeah,
allow them to be in their box while still working together.
for sure.
Love it. Well, thank you so much,
Great, this
Anuja,
is
for joining
lovely.
me. Yes, hopefully everybody enjoyed the conversation, found it thoughtful and insightful. And thank you all. If you're not, feel free to subscribe to the Substack as well if you want the Cliff Notes version of some of the biggest insights coming out of this. But thanks all for tuning in, and we will see you on the other side.